The world today faces an energy crisis as our demands outstrip our finite resources. Hydrogen has been touted as a replacement for our dependence on fossil fuel. Unfortunately, it is too volatile for storage, transport, or consumer use. Southwest Research Institute believes that they have found a method to render it temporarily inert using plasma coating. However, their current plasma head leaves much to be desired. To discuss this in detail, I'd like to introduce the team lead of Perma Plasma, Christian Ars.
So we are doing the HiPIP system, which stands for the high power impulse plasma source, which is basically a plasma coater that uses the plasma method. One of the end goals that we want to do with this is to be able to store hydrogen inside of carbon and make it more cost effective for transport and for usage.
So currently the problems that we have with hydrogen storage is that you have to liquefy the material and then you also have to compress it. So, you have an inherently dangerous combination where you have a pressurized tank and then you have a flammable material. Not exactly great when you're going down 1604, then you have a bomb goes off, traffic already sucks up there already. So our current system that we're designing is a way to avoid this. We're gonna have a nanoparticle deposition process for carbon. So we're gonna have hydrogen be stored within that carbon and provide a safer alternative.
Cool. So we are Perma Plasma. My name is Christian. This is Emiliano. This is Michael. This is Rod. And this is Patrick.
Okay, so current plasma coating systems use high temperatures or vacuum pressures. To attain vacuum pressures, you have to use a vacuum chamber. This chamber can cost up to $500 million. And then high temperatures can potentially damage the material you want to coat. The HiPIP machine is different. It uses ambient temperatures and is conducted at atmospheric pressures. Also, it only costs about $100,000.
There's also a source as well called a high impulse power magnetron sputtering system, which focuses on magnetism instead of a sacrificial cathode, but based on the client's needs, he would like to work on the HiPEP system.
Cool. So the purpose of our project is to be able to optimize this first iteration. This is important so that we can grow the marketability as well as the infrastructure of the hydrogen fuel source.
The first iteration that we were given was a prototype, and you can see that it is too large. We shrank that to fit inside of a CNC machine. Initially, the prototype had a three-dimensional large centering mechanism. We were able to shrink that into a smaller size. It also did not have a feeding system. We were able to introduce one. We optimized the feeding mechanism or the feed for the argon gas as well as the charging mechanism.
Okay, so as you can see right here, this is the rod. This rod is the material that will be used. That is the coating material. This coating material can be potentially deposited on the nozzle, which is something the client does not want. One of our jobs was to make sure to redesign the nozzle to make sure that this doesn't happen. As you can see, this is our this was the initial design by Swery. This is the design that Swery made, and this is the current design being used right now to prevent that deposition on the nozzle.
Okay, so one of our other mechanisms is a 2-in-1. It's a self-centering as well as a feeding mechanism that's driven by a motor. Another problem that we had is being able to charge the cathode while feeding it in the Y direction. So what this does is it takes the DC motor approach using the same brushes.
And we also had a problem with where the argon flow would be, so I decided to put it near in this little chamber where the sacrificial cathode will be at. And this is one of the representations of one of the inlets, and there's going to be 4 inlets. This is also the Gantt chart for all of our deliverables and also the due dates and completion.
Cool, so here we have our labor costs. This is basically budgeted work performed, budgeted work performed, and actual costs all in one table.
All right, moving on, we have our preliminary cost analysis. So this is just a breakdown of the materials that we'll be using in our system. So we're very happy where we're at right now because we were able to drive down it from $5,000 based on removing their previous XYZ manipulator. So we are very happy with where we are right now.
We're also going to be developing future tests, just like the samples we're going to be presenting. The future test is going to be based off of the surface of the experimented surface is based off the sacrificial cathode that we're using, and we're also going to be measuring the deposition rate at the nozzle.
And then, as I mentioned before about the nozzle, we're going to be testing to make sure that there's no deposition on the nozzle, and that to make sure that the cathode rod is always collinear to the nozzle.
Here we have a QR code for a nice little website that we created. If you can zoom in on that, just so our viewers can scan that if they want to. Perfect.
And we are also supported by Josh Mangum. He is the department lead and also our mentor, and he's also in par with Armando Rios at Southwest Research Institute.